We'll now look at another heart that has been controversial in the past, but which is readily described when we examine the phenotypic features of all the segmental components. Let's start off by looking at the right-sided atrium. As we open the atrium, we see that there are many pectinate muscles within the appendage, and when we look at the posterior part, we see that those pectinate muscles extend all the way around the atrioventricular junction. And here we see the coronary sinus entering the inferior part of the atrium. This is a morphologically right atrium. But when we look at the atrioventricular valve taking origin from this chamber, we see that it does not look like a tricuspid valve. And indeed, as I open the ventricle beneath, you see that this ventricle has a smooth septal surface and has fine crisscrossing apical trabeculations. The right-sided ventricle, connected to the morphologically right atrium, is a morphologically left ventricle. If we then look at the other half of the heart, we see that the atrium on the left side has a tubular appendage, and opening the atrium confirms that its posterior wall is smooth, without pectinate muscles extending to the crux, a morphologically left atrium. The valve arising from this ventricle, however, has septal connections, typical of the tricuspid valve, and when we look at the apical part of this ventricle, we see it is coarsely trabeculated, a morphologically right ventricle on the left side of the heart, joined up to the morphologically left atrium. In other words, the heart has discordant atrioventricular connections. When we look at the ventriculo-arterial connections, however, we find that the arterial trunk giving rise to the brachiocephalic vessels, the aorta, supporting here also a coronary artery, is arising from the morphologically right ventricle with a complete muscular infundibulum, whilst the morphologically left ventricle gives rise to an arterial trunk which immediately bifurcates the pulmonary trunk. The ventriculo-arterial connections, therefore, are discordant. The presence of both discordances cancel out, so that the pulmonary venous blood, coming back from the lungs, reaches the body through the aorta, albeit having traversed the morphologically right ventricle. This combination of discordant connections at atrioventricular and ventriculo-arterial levels is congenitally corrected transposition, or double discordance.